Yuri, thank you for joining us again. There's been a lot of developments in Ukraine since we spoke last a few weeks ago, but I understand now from what I hear, Ukraine is making a serious push to take back some of the territory that was taken away, some of it back in 2014. What's the latest there?
Yes, indeed. During the last couple of days, Ukrainian army was, you know, spectacularly successful um, around Kharkiv and in the Kherson region. So the counteroffensive around Kharkiv has been very, very successful. We have pushed the enemy back all the way to the Russian border in some places. So the depth of the Ukrainian army penetration is about 50, sometimes 70 kilometers. We have been able to recapture over 2,000 square kilometers only within the last 48 hours, maybe a bit more now. But since the 1st of September, as our commander-in-chief, General Zaluzhny, said yesterday, we have been able to regain 3,000 square kilometers of our land. So this is like a counteroffensive blitzkrieg, which Ukraine has conducted spectacularly. And both military experts as well as our officials, like our Minister of Defense, Mr. Alexei Reznikov, they say that this is probably the biggest setback of the Russian aggressive army since their retreat from Kiev region earlier in April. Mm-hmm. So and every hour, essentially, we are getting reports of new Ukrainian villages and cities being liberated.
Right. What do you think is the reason for this spectacular success that you're talking about?
There are two main factors which have determined this success. One of them is, of course, the military mastery and skill of the Ukrainian army. We have proven again that the Ukrainian army is really good at planning and conducting strategic operations. So that's number one. And of course, determination of the Ukrainian army, our willingness to defeat the enemy, to drive the enemy out of our homes, out of our country. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is the military support of our international partners, and US leading the way in this context. So Ukrainian army, our skills and our determination, combined with the Western modern weapons, resulted in a very, very fast progress of the Ukrainian army in those directions.
So this is again, as you said, has been spectacular. How long do you believe the Ukrainian army can maintain this kind of success, with these weapons and of course with the expertise that the Ukrainian army is bringing to this fight? How long do you think this can be sustained?
I wouldn't want to speculate or make any forecasts because this is still a war, and things change very fast. We have been successful during the last couple of days. Of course, we will do our best to achieve as much progress as possible, to use the momentum and to keep going. The Russian army is fleeing. Russian army is fleeing chaotically, right? It seems like they're desperate. They have no idea what to do. Their command is quiet. Their propaganda is lying. Their Ministry of Defense is spreading some stupid explanations about what is happening on the battlefield. They're saying that this is regroupment, this is redeployment of Russian army, but in fact, they're fleeing in large numbers, abandoning tanks, abandoning armored vehicles, abandoning their own soldiers, and even their killed soldiers. So this doesn't look like any pre-planned military activity on the part of Russians. This looks like a flight. And as for how long we will be able to sustain this tempo, we will see. We will keep going until we can. Hopefully, we will liberate as much of our land as possible. But look, we are seeing that Russians, and this is the true essence of the Russian army, right? They are unable to fight on the battlefield. So what they're doing is, of course, they're resorting to their proven tactics of missile terror. And yesterday, they have struck Kharkiv, and they're striking now the vital, critical infrastructure. So, for example, Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine now, is cut off from electricity. The subway has stopped, and you know, this is another proof that Russia is a state, is a terrorist state. They're hitting civilian residential areas and critical civilian infrastructure because they are, you know, what's the word? They feel desperate. They have nothing else they can do. So they're just as weak as cowards. They're
Yeah.
striking missiles.
Yeah, I know you haven't been in these villages where, you know, that have been liberated in the last few days, but I'm sure you've heard from your comrades and your colleagues about the elation that people have expressed in these villages when they've seen Ukrainian troops coming and, of course, the Ukrainian flag being raised. Can you give us a description of what you've heard from your colleagues about this?
Absolutely. For every Ukrainian soldier who is now involved in this de-occupation military operation, in this counteroffensive, it is heartwarming to see the response and the reaction of the local people who are greeting them with open arms, you know, and these are sincere feelings. You know, people who have been living under the threat of terror and looting and everything for a long time in some of those places, right? So, but look, Russians are even now, as they're fleeing, so that you understand, they are stealing people's cars. You know, so they are abandoning tanks, but they're taking people's cars. You know, like so that they have a loot from
Yeah.
this war. So it's of course those people who are now in the liberated villages and towns and cities. They're very happy that the Ukrainian army is back. But for Ukrainian army, of course, you know, and I will repeat, this is a war. It's one thing to retake the territories. It's another thing to kind of keep the control over them, right? And
Yeah.
this will be very important in the coming weeks.
Yeah, you know, there's really an interesting story here with, you know, the tanks being abandoned, the armored vehicles being abandoned. I saw the other day where some Russian soldiers were stealing bicycles to try to get away, and you can't really get very far on a bicycle considering the kind of technology that's being used to hunt down Russian tanks, et cetera, et cetera. So and I saw that there were POWs, et cetera. So one final thing I'll ask you about this. How would you characterize Ukraine's plans for dealing with these troops that are being caught right now?
Well, those who will surrender, they will be accorded treatment in line with the Geneva Conventions. You know, we are a civilized nation. We adhere to the international law. And despite the fact that, of course, we hate these people because they have come to our land and they have been killing our people, we understand that Ukraine is part of the civilized world. And Ukraine must abide by those rules because the international support is contingent on us being part of the membership of civilized nations. So our feelings, we can put them aside, and with cold heart and a cold mind, we will treat them as prisoners of war. And of course, our leadership is encouraging. Like for example, we've had report today from one of the deputies of the Ministry of Defense that Ukrainian multi-launch rocket systems are now firing rockets, and each one contains 1,500 leaflets explaining to the Russian soldiers how to surrender, and they don't have to die. This is our message to them. They don't have to die in a war which is unjust, in a war which is aggressive, in a war which was concocted by their crazy, deranged leader. They can surrender, and they will be given food, they will be given shelter, and when the time comes, they will be exchanged for the Ukrainian prisoners of war.
Okay, and the very last thing I'll ask you briefly, Yuri, is about the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's been in danger for months now, and this danger seems to get worse each week. What's the status of that plant right now?
Well, there was a mission of the UN International Atomic Energy Agency, and they've inspected this atomic plant. And at the moment, from what I understand, during the last week at least, the shelling of this atomic plant has subsided, because the attention now of both Ukrainian army and the aggressors are in different directions, right? So the Russians are fleeing, Ukrainians are attacking. So, but the Russians still are in control of the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. So, which means that the threat remains. And we continue to call on the international community to mount pressure on Russia to completely demilitarize, to get out from that nuclear plant.
All right. Well, Yuriy Sak, you have been a steady and strong source of information since this war began, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you very much. Wishing you the best. Congratulations on your success. Hopefully it continues, and I hope we can stay in touch.
We will. We will.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuriy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, JJ.